Rob Trujillo is possibly one of the most charismatic bassists in the world of metal, who, despite the whole fact that he's been in Metallica for longer than any other bassist, is still considered a newcomer by many fans. So today let's take a look at the backstory of Rob Trujillo before he joined Metallica, discuss his early days and jazz upbringing, and then hopefully answer the question of whether he was actually the right choice for Metallica back in the day. Here you go. Super quick guys, as always, please do not hesitate to comment on anything you hear or see in this video, and especially if you disagree with me, because the whole point of our Metal Pilgrim channel is of course to start a conversation. But alright, let's do it. There is a reason why Robert Trujillo feels both like the most and the least metal bass player Metallica ever had. Born on October 23rd in 1964 in California, way before joining the biggest metal band on the planet and becoming known for his crab walk, stage moves and infectious grin, Robert was just a kid, obsessed with the bass, and inspired by none other but Jaco Pastorius. And if you know anything about Jaco, well, that tells you everything. Robert once said that Jaco had this edge that blew past jazz. He was funk, rock, soul, and punk rock attitude all at the same time, and that attitude stuck. And it is what pushed Rob to pick up the bass and never let it go. At first, like most kids chasing the dream, he jammed with local cover bands, blasting out Sabbath, Zeppelin, Ozzy, and Rush at backyard parties in SoCal, which, by the way, given his future on divorce, I think is kind of ironic, but nevertheless. When Robert turned 19, he went all in and enrolled in jazz school with the goal of becoming a studio musician. And although it could have been his path, well, it was his love for rock and metal that outweighed everything else. And it was when the slap grooves and pocket playing of funk met metal when the real Rob Trujillo we know this guy for today was actually born. Metal when the real Rob Trujillo we know this guy for today was actually born. By 1989, as Tendencies, yeah, I know it sucks, but I simply cannot pronounce this name here. Either way, they were already legends of the crossover thrash movement, and by that summer they needed a new bassist. Bob Heathcote had just left the band to focus on family, and they needed someone who could not only keep up, but push things forward. And that's exactly how they landed on Robert Trujillo. Rob joined right before their European tour with Anthrax, which kicked off on June 1st in Bremen, Germany. And while by then the band had already started their shift from hardcore skate punk to a more aggressive thrash metal territory, Trujillo also brought something absolutely new to the band's mix: funk. And that shift became crystal clear on 1990 Lights Camera Revolution record, Trujillo's first album with the band. And this album wasn't just a turning point for the band, it to this very day is one of their absolute best ones. The songs got way more technical, progressive, and even jazzy at times. Rob co-wrote the track Lovely, and his bass lines across the record were simply next level, resulting in the band being nominated for their very first ever Grammy Award, which they actually lost to a little band called Metallica. Which is kind of ironic, right?
So here to perform the song One from the Grammy-nominated album And Justice for All, Metallica!
Over the next 4 years, as Tendencies dropped 3 more albums with Rob, making him the most recorded bassist in the band's history. In 1992, The Art of Rebellion went even deeper into experimental territory, blending alt metal with progressive rock and funk, and hitting number 52 on Billboard 200 charts in the United States. Which to this very day actually remains their highest charting album ever. Then came Still Psycho after all these years in 93, a re-recording of their 83 debut, and a way less accessible but much more raw and aggressive As for Life, released in 1994, on which, by the way, Rob Trujillo co-wrote 5 tracks. But if we're being very honest, that album simply didn't land, and despite the whole fact that it still reached number 82 on Billboard 200, the band lost their deal with Epic Records, eventually breaking up in 1995. But although the Tendencies was of course Trujillo's main act in the early 1990s, well, it definitely wasn't his only one, because at exactly the same time, him and Mike Muir were actually cooking up something way weirder, way funkier, and just plain fun. Infectious Grooves was a side project born in 1989 out of Muir's obsession with the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Trujillo's groove-laced bass wizardry. Joined by guitarist Dean Pleasance, Axl's Adam Siegel, and Jane's Addiction's drummer Stephen Perkins, they basically created a funk metal beast that didn't sound like anything around. And already in 1991, they recorded their very first debut album. Titled The Plague That Makes Your Booty Move, it's The Infectious Grooves. Yeah, that's a real title. And it is possibly one of the coolest ones ever. But instantly enough, although it was basically a party record on which the boys didn't really take them too seriously, it was this album that shaped Rob Trujillo's future, as it was on this record on which the band invited nobody else but the legendary Ozzy Osbourne himself to do guest vocals on the track Therapy. One of the 16 songs on this album, 10 out of which were actually written by Rob Trujillo. And who knows, maybe if it wasn't for this album, which by the way landed at number 6 at Billboard Heat Seekers, Rob Trujillo would never eventually have gotten one of the most important gigs of his life. The gig with the legendary Prince of Darkness. Then came the 1993 Cercipius arc, on which Rob co-wrote 11 songs already, and which, by the way, reached number 1 on the Billboard Heat Seekers chart, making it one of the highest charting albums Rob Trujillo had ever released in his career, after which the band went on to release Groove Family Psycho in 1994 and took a rather long break until 2000 and their Más Borracho record, which many critics, despite the whole fact that it was still a very fun record, called simply boring, resulting in Infectious Grooves eventually disbanding the next year after its release. But nevertheless, it is this side project which eventually would become one of the most important ones in Rob Trujillo's career, as it did give him space to experiment, co-write, and simply go wild with rhythm, which would eventually shape him as the bassist we all know him for today. But the most important thing about Infectious Grooves was of course the whole fact that it would eventually become a stepping stone for what would become one of the most important gigs in Rob Trujillo's career. As back in 1991, when the Infectious Grooves were recording their debut album together with the legendary Ozzy Osbourne, the two camps simply hit it off, even despite the whole fact that Ozzy called Infectious Grooves boring guys for not having any beer or weed around. But that's classic Ozzy, right?
Hello there.
How are you?
Fine.
So when in 1996 the legendary Prince of Darkness was in need of a new bass player, Rob simply felt like a natural choice for him. And although at first Rob was brought in as a live musician only, eventually Ozzy's label Epic Records did push for a new studio album. And in April of 2000 it was Rob Trujillo. He would eventually enter the studio together with the legendary Ozzy Osbourne and his bandmates to record what would become Down to Earth, thus fulfilling a lifelong dream of an Ozzy Osbourne fan from California.
If only we could all just find serenity.
And even more, although it was his first gig with Ozzy, he actually did help co-write 3 tracks on that album, those being That I Never Had, Junkie, and Can You Hear Them? And of course later on Trujillo famously said that hearing Ozzy's voice on the songs he helped write in was one of the biggest goals he'd ever achieve as a musician. And in addition to that, Down to Earth actually hit top 10 in multiple countries, so not a bad first gig with the Osman. But if we're being very honest, not everything during Trujillo's time with Ozzy Osbourne was as wholesome. As somewhere in between touring and recording, he also got caught up in one of the most controversial moves in Ozzy's entire discography, the infamous 2002 reissues of Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman. And if you absolutely have no idea what's going on, well, the deal went like this. Bassist Bob Daisley and drummer Lee Kerslake had been locked in a legal battle with the Osbournes over unpaid royalties. So to finally settle it, somebody at the Osbournes camp had a genius idea of doing the reissues of those albums, replacing both of their parts using nobody else but Rob Trujillo on bass and Mike Borden on drums. And although it was claimed that it was done to simply refresh the records, to many fans it actually felt like sacrilege. And only years later, when Kerslake was terminally ill, did Ozzy finally reconcile with him and Daisley, and the original versions were restored. But nevertheless, regarding of that drama, Robert's time with Ozzy Osbourne helped cement his status as a top-tier bassist. And not just a funk metal wizard or a crossover guy, but somebody who could actually play stadiums and hold his own next to metal's all-time icons. By the way guys, here I just wanted to thank all my patrons and all of the YouTube channel members. Guys, it is thanks to you that I am able to do this research and release these videos for you. So thank you guys from the bottom of my heart.
Dig it, Facebook.
But if we're being very honest, working with Ozzy Osbourne is not the only thing that relates Rob Trujillo with the legendary classic heavy metal from Birmingham. As back in the mid-90s, when the Tendencies and Infectious Grooves were doing their own thing, Trujillo also got involved in something pretty epic. The debut studio record of the legendary Judas Priest guitarist Glenn Tipton. At that time, Priest was on a hiatus after Rob Halford's departure, and Tipton decided to go his own way, recording Baptism of Fire in various studios in both the United Kingdom and the United States, one of which happened to be Devonshire Studio, the same place where Infectious Grooves were working at the same time. And so just like that, by accident and pretty randomly, Robert actually ended up laying bass on 3 of the tracks on Baptism of Fire, those being Hardcore, Voodoo Brother, and the Rolling Stones cover Painted Black, which was released on just some of the pressings of that record. And yeah, I know that it is one of the most random and weird ones, but at the same time, in my opinion, one of the most awesome footnotes in metal history, and especially for someone like myself, who is a die-hard Judas Priest fan. Fast forward to 2002, Trujillo also played on Jerry Cantrell's haunting solo album Degradation Trip, which was released just 2 months after a tragic death of Elaine Staley. And that same year, he also showed up on Black Label Society's 1919 Eternal. And although he was technically a full-time member of BLS by then, he actually only recorded bass for 2 of the songs on that record, those being Demise of Sanity and Life, Birth, Blood, Doom, both of which are actually pretty cool songs. And of course it was Black Label Society, which was supposed to be Rob Trujillo's new main act. And who knows, maybe if things would have gone differently, he would have recorded a whole record together with Zakk Wylde. But the thing is that 2003 was just around the corner, and we all know what happened then. Now, every Metallica fan knows the story of how Rob Trujillo got the gig at Metallica. And if you don't, well, you can just watch this one, which I still have on a VHS, which I have no idea how to watch these days, but nevertheless. I don't think that there's any point in talking about how Rob Trujillo got the gig at Metallica in this episode, because this is a story for a completely different time, which, by the way, if you would like me to release a special episode about how Rob actually got the gig and who else participated in auditions, which would tell much more than you can see in this film, please let me know in the comments. I'll be more than happy to do that. But nevertheless, he did get the gig. So the biggest question is that, given all that background that we just discussed, was Robert Trujillo actually the right choice for Metallica back then? And here's the thing, if we take a look at the history of Metallica's bassists, at least the ones with whom they recorded stuff, Cliff Burton was a classically trained wizard with a deep knowledge of theory and harmony. The guy introduced wah pedals and Bach to thrash metal. Jason Newsted, a pure-blood metalhead with that relentless energy, who, as we know from his Voivod days, had way more range than he was ever allowed to show in Metallica. And then came Rob Trujillo, and he came at a pivotal time for the band. A bassist with jazz and funk roots, a love for groove, and the technical chops to match. In other words, a completely different type of beast. But the thing about Metallica is that whether you like this band or not, it is one of those bands that knows exactly what they're doing. And when they brought him into the band in 2003, they didn't just hire a guy who could hold down the low end. They brought a musician who could elevate it, someone with feel, flair, and firepower, who would be a perfect match for a new era of Metallica. Robert's unique background gave Metallica exactly what they needed at the time: a new layer, a new groove, and a new perspective. Just like what he did with the Tendencies in the 1990s, he helped the band evolve without losing their core. And his stage presence, of course, also brought back some of that early Metallica ferocity that was kind of lost for a couple of years back then. And let's not forget, Robert joined Metallica at a pivotal time for the band. Saint Anger had just dropped, the band was barely holding it together, and that Some Kind of Monster era was, well, messy to say the least. It was a time of turmoil, and as we know from Metallica's history, the only way they know how to get out of that turmoil is by moving forward to an absolutely new era of the band, with a completely different sound, which would once again shake the core of Metallica fans. And if we talk about that new era of Metallica, which in my opinion simply was essential for the band to exist after the early 2000s, choosing Rob Trujillo for that era wasn't just a smart move, it was an essential one, without which this band would most likely have never survived until today. But anyways, what do you guys personally think about Rob Trujillo, and do you think the band was right to bring him in back in 2003? Please let us know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and we will prevail. Slava Ukraini!